Welcome to Sustainable Packaging and Packaging Europe, the first ever crossover episode of this podcast. I'm so excited to have three incredible people from the industry, three visionaries, I think, that have really made an impact on our world of sustainable packaging and are doing big things together. We're talking about a partnership today between the Sustainable Packaging Coalition and the Sustainable Packaging Summit, which is Packaging Europe's event in Amsterdam. This event will be co-located in Amsterdam, November the 11th, 12th, and 13th of November. And I just can't wait to be there. But for all of you listening, please be sure to stay tuned to the end where you can hear about discount codes and things like that, or look at the show notes so you can buy tickets today and attend this great event. But let's start with some brief intros. Mr. Tim Sykes, if you don't mind starting us off with an intro about yourself and your role at the Packaging Europe.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Cory. I don't think I've ever been called a visionary before, and I think it's probably too kind. But I do like to work with visionaries and to provide a platform for them. So I'm brand director at Packaging Europe, and essentially we are a platform for information that's trying to support the whole packaging FMCG value chain to educate itself and align strategically and to understand the opportunities that there are in alignment and innovation so that they can remain fit for purpose in the future in a ever-changing, ever more challenging world.
Well said. Tom, your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Cory. Appreciate the intro and glad to be on the podcast again. My name is Tom Pollock. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at GreenBlue, which means I work with other like-minded mission-based organizations, nonprofits, associations to find ways where we can combine our expertise and work on projects together collaboratively to have more impact, to scale up and find ways to really bring solutions to some of these really serious and important issues better, faster, cheaper.
Well said, sir. Olga, save the best for last.
Well, thanks, Cory. Thanks for having us on the show, and happy to be sharing more about the events that we have planned and really dive into some of the specifics of the programs. My name is Olga Kachook. I'm the director of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, which is a program of GreenBlue, our parent nonprofit. And folks probably are familiar with SPC through our two events that we do in the US, Impact in the spring and Advance in the fall. So we'll be hopefully seeing a lot of your listeners at those events in the US, but we also have a European event that we've been doing for a number of years, and that is SPC Engage. So that's what we're going to talk about today. That's the event that we're co-locating with the Sustainable Packaging Summit. Super excited for that. I think it just makes so much sense. And we can dive into the specifics of the program. But in terms of my role, I lead a team that helps our members, our member companies understand the industry and the landscape. It's very rapidly evolving, especially in the US when it comes to legislation, and companies want to make progress on their goals, understand what their options are for new innovations and materials. So there's a lot to unpack when it comes to sustainable packaging and a lot to keep up with, and we want to help our members do that. So we have a lot of content both at the events with our programming and resources independent of our programming, as well as working groups for members.
Yes, well said. A lot of resources available for SPC, Sustainable Packaging Coalition members. I'm honored to be one of those at Aurora Packaging. And I think this location where we're having this event is historic. It's a beautiful building. And I've had the honor of getting to go the last couple of years. Thank you, Tim, for the invite. And to have it here, I think it feels almost dramatic, and it's very exciting. But Tom, I'd really like to speak about this event. How did this collab come to be? It makes perfect sense to me, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, you bet. And I'm also excited to go to Amsterdam, and the buildings look amazing. And I think it is indicative, or it's a good example of what we're trying to do through better design, cleaner design for sustainable packaging and sustainable problem. Yeah, there's a couple ways. Olga started to, I think, hit on it, where in the last 4 or 5 years, our members, a lot of them are international, global brands. they've been asking us to look a little bit more internationally, globally, to find some solutions to, again, to some of these issues that are global. So we've been hosting SBC Engage over the last 3 or 4 years. And I know that we've talked with Tim in the Sustainable Packaging Summit and had this idea to potentially co-locate so that we can really connect the dots. I think it really makes sense when you look at the Sustainable Packaging Summit program, when you look at our program, they're really meant to complement each other. Because if we can start to think about the solutions to climate change or sustainable packaging or reuse, there's lots that, of course, we can learn from what's happening in Europe and hopefully vice versa. So that exchange of ideas, that the discussion, there's lots of, you'll see, I think, at the program on each of the days, areas where that collaboration across supply chains and across regions is really important. And then, of course, Tim and the Sustainable Packaging Summit has such a great reputation. It's an excellent event. We've always heard so many good things about it that it was just made sense for us to try and co-locate with them. And we're really excited to be doing it this year.
It feels epic to me, bringing these two great organizations together. It feels I've been to both of your events separately, and to be very candid, they're some of my favorites, and they're very well run, all incredibly professional, and the content is top notch. The speakers that you all get or bring to the events are some of the most inspiring and innovative people in our industry. So I learned so much, even after 27 years in this industry. I'm constantly learning every single day, especially at these events. But I'd like to do something a little different here today with three heavy hitters in this industry on this podcast. I'd like to talk about the themes that you're going to cover and at these events. And I'm going to ask each of you to contribute. We'll start with Olga. So how do you plan to cover things like regulation, goals and targets, and reusable packaging?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a lot to cover, right? And our event is one day, so we're really squeezing a lot in there. And I think it starts with the overall theme that we have for the event, which is harmonizing action. And I think the word harmonizing is really important. That's what we're trying to do by having it be a European event co-located with another European event. And the idea is really for companies, for attendees, and the organizations that they represent to start to harmonize their approach to sustainable packaging across North America, Europe, other regions, so that we're not doing widely different things and pursuing widely different strategies in different markets without a good reason. Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it really is the best fit and you want to have a localized strategy. But in many cases, we can really learn from each other and row in the same direction using the same strategies in both markets. And we want to have more learning from what is working well in Europe to leapfrog some of the challenges that they might have had so that we can move faster in the US. And so that's one of the big, I think, advantages and one of the big learnings that we want our attendees to get from the event. So the overall theme, harmonizing action. But then to your question, Cory, about, okay, what are we going to cover? You're right. Regulation is top of mind for everyone, both Americans and Europeans, and really many other parts of the world as well. So we've got some great sessions that will be exploring EPR implementation and what that looks like. And I think that's one of those cases where companies can really learn a lot from the European teams in their global organization or their European counterparts, because they've been doing this for longer than we in the US have had to do or to think about as part of some of the newer EPR bills that have come out. So all of those really thorny questions about data and how we're going to collect information and report on it, and how are we going to know what fees we have to pay, the Europeans, I'm not going to say I don't think they completely figured it out, but they're much farther along, and we can really pick up some great pointers. So we're going to have some sessions covering that to, again, leapfrog some of the challenges and like, hey, let's just do what they're doing. If it's working, if it's meeting the challenge in the European market, surely it can work in the US market as well. And then to your question about targets, that's on everyone's mind. And I know that the Sustainable Packaging Summit will have a number of sessions on this. We are going to be doing a fireside chat on unifying how companies will meet their sustainable packaging targets. So I'll have the pleasure of chatting with Michelle Gibbons from the European Brands Association about this. How do we really make sure that we're aligning again on the approach for actually meeting the targets this kind of second time around? I think companies set targets for 2025. Many of them didn't meet those targets. How can we improve and do things differently as we look at 2030 targets? So I don't think there's any easy answers there, but again, the European perspective will be really important. And that's one of those places where we can look at how can we set the same goals or set the same interim targets and row in the same direction, use the same strategies in multiple markets. And then finally, reuse. Reuse is one of those areas that I think in the US, a lot of companies are struggling with. They've set targets. They know that it's important. They've done some pilots, but they're not sure what's next. And again, European companies, European innovators and solutions providers are further along. They have great examples and case studies of what's working. Some of this is driven by local PROs, like in France, where they're really looking at strategies like standardization and pooled packaging and harmonizing the design of packaging so that more peers can use the same types of packaging for a reuse system that's shared in order to share costs and make it easier for consumers. So there's again a lot of strategies that we can learn from and I think co-build with the European counterparts of many companies. So hoping to cover all of those in one day. Like I said, we have a packed program and a lot in there and some really fantastic keynotes. So we're being ambitious, but I think we can do it.
Exciting. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Tim, your turn, sir.
Well, I think that first of all, to Tom's point about the reason for our collaboration, we've been huge admirers of the work of GreenBlue and the Sustainable Packaging Coalition for several years. I think we're very aligned in terms of our values as organizations and our mission, particularly the emphasis on nurturing collaborative action and particularly the emphasis on impact from the events that we run. We're not here just to chat, but to try to understand how we can move the industry forward and try to break down some of the disconnects that we have. And at the same time, I think we have really interesting contrasts in terms of where our strengths lie. So obviously GreenBlue, as we've just heard, originate in North America, but very outward looking and increasingly curious about how they can both learn from other regions and bring their learnings to other regions, while Packaging Europe self-evidently have self-Eurocentric origins, but we're increasingly global in our audience and our thinking. And I think more specifically, we have a strong sense that the environmental problems that we're addressing are global and the impacts that are felt most acutely happening outside of Europe. And we can't really make progress without having action that's based on intercontinental alignment and different understandings and different regions understanding each other better. And so I'm really excited about having two events side by side, which enable a kind of dialogue between those two different perspectives, and where, hopefully the audience can carry over from one event into the other and be enriched by that. So we're also addressing these topics that we've just alluded to for regulation. Obviously, it's a huge topic at the moment in Europe with the PPWR, the packaging and packaging waste regulation coming into effect with lots of uncertainty about the impacts. And on top of that, we're going to expect a wider tsunami of secondary legislation in all of the different member states. So people are asking themselves, how can we act to ensure compliance, whether there are actually blind spots in the legislation that we should be thinking about, and whether national implementation will create harmony, as we hope, or potentially fragmentation across the whole of the EU. And that raises wider questions about its impact on economic competitiveness and also ramifications for other regions of the world, like North America, but also other parts of the world, which are really watching Europe and asking themselves, are there things that we should emulate? Are there things that are going to affect us? So we will have a session where we're focusing on these big questions about European regulation, featuring Mattia Pellegrini from the European Commission, Crawdon from EXPRA, the EPR organization, Jody Roussel from Nestle, Francesca Stevens from Europen. And also we'll have a separate session looking at reporting implications. So the new European Union rules come with an associated burden of reporting on things like recycled content, how much packaging is getting recycled. And I think this is going to be one of the big challenges for enterprises in ensuring compliance. And maybe that's a road that other regions that are earlier on their regulatory journey will have to expect to go down, and something that they can maybe learn from both our lessons and our mistakes. And then on goals and targets, I think one of the overarching contexts of the whole of our Sustainable Packaging Summit is how can we maintain momentum on stability? And that's taking place on a backdrop of a challenging economic landscape. We've got high interest rates for borrowing. Consumer spending is more challenging than it has been for a while. So there's questions about whether there's more resistance in the ability or the willingness or the bravery to invest in sustainability. And we also have significant global brands scaling back on some of their environmental commitments. So I think this is a question not just of reluctance to act, but also a question of how do we approach the challenge of wider infrastructure not being present, and these forces that are out of control of any individual enterprise. So we really want to ask ourselves, frankly, are we falling behind our trajectory? How can we accelerate progress despite all of these challenges and headwinds that we're operating within? And we'll have some speakers who are trying to share their visions for sustainable transformation, such as Virginie Helias from Procter & Gamble, Elvire Regnier, who has a background in corporate procurement, talking about her idea of regenerative procurement, Sander de Fruit, who's the New Plastics Economy lead at Ellen MacArthur Foundation, talking about progress on circular economy, and Louis Lindenberg, formerly of Unilever, who I expect is going to be telling us some home truths now he's liberated from his corporate communications restrictions. And yeah, finally on reuse, last year we had a session that was focusing more on reusable formats. And this year we're trying to think more broadly about how can we create conditions that are conducive to scaling up reduction of reuse models, and how can we help consortiums emerge and prosper that deliver that. So we'll be looking at the role of regulation, standards. We'll have a speaker from GS1, for example, how EPR can support that. We'll have CITEO, the French EPR, which has been really progressive in thinking about supporting reuse as well as recycling. And as well as that, the lessons learned by brands and embryonic reuse consortiums. So I think there'll be quite a lot of comparing and contrasting between the two programs, which are all looking at these different really important central tasks that we all have from these slightly different angles and vantage points and lenses.
I agree with what both of you are saying. Europe is ahead of us in North America in many ways, and America is ahead of Europe in some ways. But bringing us all together in one place in Amsterdam is perfect because it's such a melting pot of global thought. And I was so excited last year to be moderating a panel of people from 4 different continents and talking about plastic. And how can we be more sustainable with plastic? How can we actually recycle it? How can we? These kinds of topics are thrilling to discuss because it's going to affect us all, like it or not. We are all in this together. So well said, Tim. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Tom, any other thoughts on that before we move to the next question?
No, I just to reiterate what you were saying, Cory. I think it's such a good point. It's not just getting together in Amsterdam because we have some similar projects that we can share best practices, but it's something that we have to do. These problems are not going to be solved unless we can have panels and people working together that are from 4 continents. So just to reiterate the good point that you made there.
Yeah, thank you. So very soon we'll be going to Chicago. To the Sustainable Packaging Coalition event and the How to Recycle Summit, the first ever. I'm very excited about that. But I want to talk about how are you at the SPC Engage event in Amsterdam going to be covering on-pack technology, on-pack symbols like how to recycle. Can you speak to that a little bit, Tom?
Yeah, it's exciting. It's actually there's the how to recycle label in North America, in the US and Canada, and then in the UK they have the OPRL, the on-pack recycling label, and they're similar but different, right? And they've started at the same time. I think actually how to recycle may have taken a few tips from OPRL at the very beginning, but they evolved in their own ways. And then about 1 or 2 years ago, we started to re-engage with OPRL just to talk about at a just a conversational level, like how are things going with you? What are you seeing, et cetera? What kind of data and resources have you collected? And we found that there's a lot of sort of similar consumer behavior that we can use to help inform how the label works, and different as well. The labels are different again, but also similar. So at SBC Engage, we have a panel with the directors of OPRL and the directors of How to Recycle, and they're going to talk about the things that we've learned. It's actually pretty interesting when we think about the consumer behavior in the UK versus in the US and Canada. So they're going to share some of the insights that they found from there. And then right after that session, they're going to talk about what's the future of dynamic labeling. So there's things like QR codes and watermarks and artificial intelligence and a lot of really interesting things where labels can go. And again, tying back in that consumer behavior research, there's the on-pack label that gives instructions as to what to do with that package. But then if there's different ways that we can signal to the consumer, whether it be on the shelf or as they're walking into a store, that kind of connects the package and the instructions to the recycling or reuse system that or composting system that it best belongs in. There's some really interesting ways that we can attack that. So by sharing kind of our approaches to the future of dynamic labeling and on-pack labeling, we've already had some really interesting discussions with them that I think we both can use sort of the lessons from our experiences to make an even better label in our different regions going forward. So I'm looking forward to that at Engage for sure.
Me too. Yeah, very exciting. It's very promising. And I think that leads right into our next question, because like I said before, packaging involves us all. We physically are interacting with packaging all day long, even if just as consumers. There are so many innovations in material, in new concepts for packaging. I'd love to discuss how you plan to speak to renewables and biofilms and things like that, seaweed, different things like that at your events. Olga, if you don't mind starting, how do you plan to cover some of those topics? Because I think a lot of people are eager to learn about these materials.
Yeah, we have our opening keynotes in the morning, two fantastic speakers will start to open our eyes to the possibilities of some new materials and just a more innovative approach to packaging design, thinking about consumer behavior when you're designing for packaging. And I'm really excited for those sessions. It's really great to hear the more inspired and I think positive approach that you get exposed to when you bring in some speakers that are maybe slightly outside of the packaging world, but work on design in other areas and see ways that they can bring some of those, that we could bring some of those principles into packaging. So really, I think those will be a great place to start. And then we have a session on some of the progress happening on compostable packaging. That's one of the areas that companies have set goals. There's a very specific use case that needs to be followed and in place, and we need that infrastructure there. But that's a group of materials that I know companies are interested in and want to keep exploring and making progress on. And then I think coming back to reuse, there's a lot there that we need to figure out with innovation, design of the packaging formats, design of the collection systems, as well as, to Tom's point, design of on-pack labeling and what Tim was talking about with the standards. How are we going to communicate to consumers that actually this is a reusable item? What does that mean? Where does it need to go? It's a whole new system that we're trying to build, and it's going to require a lot of consumer education and smart design throughout that entire system. So that's what some of these organizations, standards bodies are trying to put into place and kind of get ahead on, so that we don't scramble to then all align on how we're messaging reuse. So there's a lot there. And then I'm really excited for the innovation stage at Tim's event. I think that's going to be the go-to place for really diving deeper into some of the new materials that are out there that companies will want to be aware of and explore with their R&D.
I agree. Well said. Very exciting. Tim, anything else to add to that? I know Olga covered a little bit on yours as well.
Yeah, appreciated, Olga. And I was going to say, actually, to your first point, I think one of the things that's really impressed me and inspired me at the SPC events that I've attended in the past is your ability to pick out challenging speakers and provocative ideas from outside of packaging. And that's something that's really influenced my way of thinking about curating content on our platforms as well. So it's something I'm particularly looking forward to at SPC Engage in November. But yeah, the outlook for materials is an important part of the Sustainable Packaging Summit program. As Olga alluded to, we have two stages, so two parallel streams. What we've talked about so far on our program is primarily the content of the strategy stage, which is more high level. And then we have the innovation stream, which is more looking at the granular challenges around materials and formats and things like that, more narrow in focus and more focusing on materials and innovation. So we'll have lots talking about circular plastics, presentations from various innovators, brand owners, looking at areas such as dissolution recycling, which is a really important new area of opportunity. We'll have Dow and Procter & Gamble talking about their partnership. On the strategy stage, we'll be exploring the opportunities for more alignment downstream in the value chain in order to accelerate that process of identifying viable solutions for procuring recycled plastic content. We'll have a panel on how we can support the global supply chains that we really need to foster collection and recycling in developing countries. So yeah, lots on circular plastics, but also quite a big focus on renewables, the opportunities around paper, where paper could be adopted to reduce the environmental footprint and all of the associated innovation opportunities and challenges. And then finally, I'd mentioned we have a session where we have pitches from startups invited to share their technologies. And on the first evening of the Sustainable Packaging Summit, we'll have a networking dinner where we announce the winners of the Sustainability Awards, the global Sustainable Packaging Innovation competition that we host. So I'll be looking socially awkward on stage as I try to support that process.
You do a great job, Tim. You're an excellent host and MC. It was the packaging awards at your event last year was one of my favorite parts to get to watch you.
We served a lot of alcohol, Cory, so that covers up all of the issues with my ability as an MC.
I appreciated that very much, but you did an awesome job and I can't wait. And I was honored to be a judge this year again. And I can assure the audience listening that the award winners will be incredible innovations in the industry. Awesome innovations this year. Well done, Tim.
Thank you. We should also mention that Olga is also a fellow member of the judging panel for the Sustainability Awards. So I appreciate both of your efforts and those of the whole jury.
Yeah, some very top-notch judges. So I think the selections were very difficult. I know Olga can attest to that as well.
Yes.
Challenging to pick.
Judge too.
Yes, yeah. She knows what she likes and doesn't like. That's good. It's important for a judge, right? So this will be the 11th of November for the SPC event and the 12th and 13th of November for the Sustainable Packaging Summit put on by Packaging Europe. I do have very good news for listeners. I have a discount code. If you're interested in attending this event, it's CoryC20, so CoryC20. If you'd like to get 20% off of your ticket, I can tell you that it's very well worth attending the event and worth the travel and worth the ticket price and then some. The networking alone is invaluable. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate the wisdom of the three of you and excited to see you in Amsterdam.
See you there. Thanks, Cory.
Thanks,
Cory.